Hello and welcome. My name's David Ridgway and this is Kirklees Local TV's weekly wind-up. We aim to be informative, interesting, amusing and provocative. We will be discussing three special topics this week. Prisons, do they work? Le Tour, has West Yorkshire really benefited from this annual jamboree? And school holidays, are they too long and are the rules too rigid? To help me with these weighty topics, my guests are, at the far end, Dr. Pete Woodcock, who is Head of Criminology, Politics and Sociology at Huddersfield University. Richard Smith, a Council Officer.
Still. Emails in the box.
Who is Head of Integrated Youth Support, IYSS. And Peter Hardy, who was a Council Officer and is now a well-known cyclist running bike works in Linthwaite.
Correct.
Bike works in Linthwaite. Brethren, welcome to you all. But we always want feedback from you. The weekly wind-up can be contacted at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and you can search on Twitter at Weekly Windup. And so to our first topic, prisons, do they really work? Well, Pete, as a Head of Criminology, Politics and Sociology at Huddersfield University, I guess you know the answer to this. Prisons, do they work?
Well, it really rather depends what it is you want them to do to assess whether or not they work or not. Now, in one sense, if the purpose of prisons is solely to take dangerous criminals and keep them away from the rest of the public, to the large part, they work. If we see prisons, however, as part and parcel of a package of criminological law and order things, well, the jury's out on that. There's a number of problems. By putting non-violent offenders in prisons, often what you do is you take them away from their family and cause sociological problems for the family, and you cause then it means that the person who may be taking part in some really, really good rehabilitative programs within prisons, but they are nonetheless outside of the general economy. So problems are there.
So when you start your answer from the point of view of public safety, and we see in the press that many dangerous prisoners are now in open prisons, or I might even say not in open prisons, but they ought to be, because they've run away. And because there's a basic public desire for retribution, which goes back to the dawn of time, are prisons really the best way forward?
Well, for certain types of situations, I think prisons are the best way forward.
Okay.
In the sense of if you have a dangerous person who needs to be taken aside from the rest of the population, then obviously prisons work.
Like Mr. Bronson.
The big question is, as you rightly say, desire for retribution. And I'm quite conservative with a small c on issues of crime, in the sense that I think that retribution is an entirely legitimate part and parcel of the criminal proceeds. However, you do have to bear in mind that you are trying to punish the person who has committed the crime, not their family, not their children, and for some things for which people go to jail, non-payment of TV licences, minor instances of fraud.
You don't go to jail for the non-payment of TV licence. You go to jail for not complying with the court order of the non-payment of TV licence, but that's exceptionally picky, isn't it?
Well,
there speaks a magistrate.
It's eye to detail, David, which we expect from you and admire you for.
Richard, you've got some knowledge of youth offender institutions. Can you destroy the myth that prisons are simply places where young criminals can hone their skills and become better criminals, i.e. prisons are places of universities of crime?
It's back to Pete's point really about what we want to achieve with prisons and young offender institutions. Certainly there are young people who need to be taken out of communities who are a risk and a danger to themselves and other people, but the majority of young people who are in custody are serving shorter sentences, and they are young people who by and large could be more effectively worked with in the local community and providing support. So it's back to the question about what you want to achieve from prison or young offender institutions. Yes, there is something about punishment, but there's got to be a bigger issue around rehabilitation.
Right.
And that is, I'm afraid, where we don't invest enough, and it all gets very political, doesn't it, about punishment and what we want to do with these wrongdoers, and it always has been. But it feels like we never really invest sufficient funds or effort into rehabilitation. The number of people in prison who've been in care, the number of black, minority ethnic people in prison, which is increasing, the number of women in prison, the number of people with mental health difficulties, housing issues, and what are they going to come out to? For many, it's serving sentences of 12 months or less and returning to the same circumstances when they come out, and that vicious cycle, which harms all of us because we're all paying for that in our communities which are affected by crime.
Indeed, and you did mention there people in prison who with mental health issues. I'm wondering whether to take this conversation down two different tracks now, so we'll quickly go down one and then we'll try and get down the other. Peter, I don't suppose you're a devotee of Coronation Street like I am?
I'm not a devotee of Coronation Street, but I can see where the next question is going,
yes,
and
well,
I do have some very recent personal experience.
Okay, well, the question is, Coronation Street has been following a theme of restorative justice over the past few weeks. Do you think that there is any benefit of bringing victims and perpetrators together?
I think most definitely for two reasons. One, my personal experience was there was a young man who was targeting my house in it was quite a destructive and upsetting way. And the first port of call that I took was to contact the police, and there was a series of incidents, a series of times the police were called out, a series of times he was arrested, but there was insufficient evidence. And what I felt was happening in that process was that he was getting more entrenched in his resentments against me and my household, because he just felt so he was getting constantly dragged to the police station. And in the end, I said to the police, I said, I think the way out of this is for you to organise a meeting between this young man and myself, and we'll thrash everything else, because I felt there were things in the background for him that were leading to this. So we had a meeting, I set everything out, I told him that I understood his point of view and what the origins of all this were, explained to him what effect his actions were having on me and my household, and we came to a sort of an understanding at the end, and he comes past my shop every week and he waves and says hello, and everything's over and done with. And
that's good.
And I think that approach, it's saved, if you're looking at it from money, it's saved a vast amount of police time in chase, interviewing me, interviewing him, locking him up, driving around.
Actually, before we do take a break, I'd just like to ask you, Pete, is it true that there are more people in prison in the UK than any other country in Europe?
I think we have the highest percentage of people per head of population. Than
and is that because the European prisons are so unbelievably awful that nobody really wants to go to them?
Holland recently reached a situation in which there's more people who work in prisons than are in prisons. It's baffling. The actual fact. But if you are a law and order conservative in Germany, in Belgium and France, the kind of issues which we're talking about trying to keep people out of prison, about restorative justice, is just part and parcel of a law and order process. Whereas here, it's anathema. It's quite political to say no, prison works, and that's one of the reasons I suspect why we're in the situation we are.
Okay, Richard.
Just a quick one. The numbers of young people in custody are at an all-time low. I don't recall a time ever when they were lower than they are now. But the challenge is for those aged 18 to 24-year-old in particular, who make up a significant number of the adult population in custody.
We'll take a break there. Thank you to our panellists for a fascinating conversation and the information given. You can add to this debate by contacting us on email at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com and on Twitter by searching at Weekly Windup. Thanks so much. Welcome back. And unusually this week, we're following on from a topic we had on the weekly wind-up last week, which is the Tour, or Le Tour, or more correctly, Le Grand Départ. Now then, Peter, has West Yorkshire really benefited from this annual jamboree?
I think West Yorkshire has benefited massively from it, and it will continue to benefit from it for years to come. I think one of the main benefits was a day of sunshine, which doesn't happen too often around here.
It's even sunny in Marsden.
Even sunny in Marsden, yeah. So I think the fact that all these crowds of people came in, obviously the local hotels, guest houses, campsites, they will all have made a healthy profit over the weekend. But I think the reason that the tour was promoted here was from the tourist angle. So what West Yorkshire has got is it's got 2 days worth of free tourism advertising, and I think it will have looked nothing but very good from that point of view, and it will have looked good to people as far afield as America, Spain, so maybe we can expect that they will be wanting to beat a path to our door over the coming years, so that they can ride around the roads that they've seen on the Tour de France and bring back some memories.
So you're really down the track here, Peter, that
Right.
It's an investment for a mid to long-term future.
Definitely.
I have to say that I was absolutely staggered at the number of people. What do you reckon, Pete?
Well, I thought it was a fantastic day. I'm not a massive cycling fan per se, but I watched it the day before, and on this tourist thing, the shots from the helicopters of the Yorkshire countryside, the towns full of fans, absolutely. There's another issue as well. For people who aren't so au fait with the sport of cycling, having something like this going through and everybody coming out, I think if another benefit might be is that kids are more likely to get on a bike and cycle to places. That's going to be good for health, it's going to be good for sport, and so on and so forth. So I can see absolutely no negatives to it at all. I thought it was a wonderful event.
Some comments have been made that the council has spent considerable funds on surfacing the route but has ignored the potholes anywhere else. Is this a fair accusation, Richard?
Oh, no. How can you ask me, as a council employee, how can you ask me a question like that? Well, I just see the roads improving, David. I think it's a marvellous thing.
Yeah, it's great driving from here to Home Firth now, but it's still a bit grim driving around my ward.
Yeah.
But nevertheless...
Well, I was thinking people might have drawn the conclusion that Kirklees was twinned with North Korea, given the silky smooth tarmac that's been laid at Lockwood Bar, but
yes.
200 yards up the road outside David Brown's are sort of world-class potholes.
Yes, absolutely so. And it's, I don't think it is a fair accusation, because I think on balance, I mean, this accusation has been put to me, but on balance, I do think that Kirklees, as a council, has demonstrated an ability to put a world-class event on and to come out of it well in front of where they expected to be. They battered massively above their average. I think it's absolutely superb.
And there's another way of looking at the same things. It might well be that areas have been tarmacked and spruced up and other areas haven't, but that doesn't mean to say that if there wasn't a Latour, it might be that the top of Lockwood and Ainley top and so on and so forth would have the very self-same potholes at the other streets. So it's,
absolutely so. We've talked about the local guest houses and campsites having a good fortnight. Brilliant. Will their profits assist the local economy?
There's got to be a benefit, hasn't there? There has to be, and it is about putting Kirklees on the map and putting it in a really good light. And anybody who arrived in Kirklees by train and walked into that square can't help but have left with a smile on the face. Puzzled maybe at first, what the hell's going on here?
Yes,
but
indeed.
it was marvellous. It was funny. It was amusing, and Kirklees did enter into the spirit of it. But I think the thing that made it for me was, apart from all the aerial shots, the public entered into it. Yeah, I mean, they made it.
Big style.
They made it, and I mean, you know, it's our legacy, isn't it, as well?
Right, I'm going to ask the last question now, Peter, to you. On balance, I presume the Grand Tour is a good thing, and indeed I expect you'll be looking to see your business expand massively over the next couple of years?
Well, what I would be expecting to see is that there'll be a growth in cycling as a result of this, and they'll all want to get their bikes repaired in my shop.
Excellent, excellent. So the roads are so bad that they still have to be
Yes.
repaired. Okay, fine. Well, that was really interesting. Thanks very much indeed for your frank and interesting comments. And so to our last topic of this week, which is school holidays. But are the school holidays too long, and are the rules around them too rigid? And the purpose of this conversation is there are now new rules which make it, I believe, I can't remember if it's a criminal offence or certainly it's an offence. If you take your children out of school during term time, you're liable to be fined. Now, Dr. Criminology, Politics and Sociology, what do you think of that?
Two kids in schools.
Well, exactly.
Well, I mean, back. There's a bit of a red herring around this argument. Around about prices of holidays and school holidays, and perhaps they would go. One of the reasons why people take their kids out of school is because holidays during the summer period are prohibitively expensive.
Indeed.
And people think, well, if we broke them up, put them around, juggle them around a bit, we would have cheaper holidays. I don't believe that for a minute. Holidays in August and the end of July are always going to be more expensive. Well, I'm not saying I like that, but that is the case. My father was a head teacher, and so the idea of me going out of school in school for me is just not the done thing. I just don't understand.
I thought you were going to say it was easier for you.
No, not a bit of it. No, for me, it's just an absolute moral principle that you go to school first thing in the morning and you come home.
Yeah.
That said, I'm not sure that I think that fining students is the way to go. I'm not necessarily convinced that moral principle of mine should be enshrined into law.
They don't find the students, they find the parents.
Well, yes. Well, it's just as well you don't find the students, isn't it? I mean,
Well, they've got no money anyway.
my stepdaughter gets like £3 pocket money a week. That wouldn't go very far in terms of.
Indeed,
but the principle behind it, I kind of agree with. People,
Peter, when you were young and when I was young, summer holidays were long, sunny and hot. We played out a lot. Our parents cut us an enormous amount of slack. Today we're told that teachers get it too easy. Is that fair?
Well, there's two things there. I don't think teachers get it too easy at all, having been a teacher myself.
Right.
In terms of the long school summer holidays, I think they are a great thing. I think kids need to have large amounts of free, unstructured time. So I think it's important for them. They shouldn't be just crammed into institutions from a very young age. They need to be free to be off with each other. The other thing I was thinking from what Peter was saying about the school holidays is I think there's a strong case for a national school holiday timetable because we live in a world where people may have family members all scattered all over the country. If we start to get a situation where each school is setting its own little school holiday timetable, we might find that's something that is detrimental to kids because they can't meet up with their sort of cousins and their wider family.
If you have family living in Scotland, that is already the case. Now, Richard, the public attitude to teaching, is it changing? Do you think that we don't hold the teaching profession in as high a regard today as we have done in previous years?
I think we do hold teaching in fairly high regard, and I just feel that teachers are under the cosh all the time in terms of performance and hitting targets and sometimes getting away from the pleasure of teaching and working with children and young people. And around school holidays as well. There's something about taking childhood away in order to, this relentless drive around academic achievement. I mean, there's something about a rounded education, isn't there, surely, that goes beyond results and academic achievement.
Have you ever bought that book, 100 Dangerous Things for Boys to Do?
I haven't, no.
Well, I skimmed through this book in a bookshop 2 or 3 years ago. My two boys now are well into their 30s. And I was so impressed with this book because it was doing all the things. It was talking about all the things that I did as a boy. So I bought it for my younger son for Christmas. He was grossly unimpressed. Well, we've done that. I think that the public or the parents take seem to be taking less responsibility for their upbringing of their children in some areas and are leaving that to teachers, which is quite wrong. And I think that the integration of teachers and the parents of the children that they teach is, I feel, growing a bit apart. Does that resonate with you guys?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we live in a time now when all authority is challenged. If you look at what's gone on in the last 20, 30 years with regards to police officers, with regards to politicians, with regards to, there has been a general challenging of the status quo, and I think that teaching is bound up in that as well. I don't think it's given the respect it's deserved. I mean, there's a number of bold statements in what you said, David, but in many ways it is pointing some good, that good schools are when teachers and parents are on the same page, they're involved with the local communities, and if you get schools working like that, then that can't be a bad thing. So in that case, you're absolutely right.
We could discuss this topic all day, but sadly, we've run out of time. We run out of time every week. You know, when God invented time, he made an awful lot of it, but he never let you use it twice. Thank you to our panellists this week. Richard, known in the council as Richard Ian Smith, because of the numbers of Richard Smiths there are in the council these days. And Dr. Pete Woodcock, thank you so much for coming on again.
My
it's
pleasure.
good to see you again. Peter, we made it this week.
Yes, we did.
Well done, well done. Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating exchange of views this week. Thank you very much for your comments. But we do need comments from you. You can contact us on email at kirkleeslocaltv.com, and you can search for us on Twitter at Weekly Windup. Thanks, see you next week.